Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Jonathon Spaid. Jonathon works with FOCUS, and I've had the opportunity to hang out with him in a few different places. I think Orlando and Denver, and did we hang out in Phoenix as well at one point, my friend?
I believe we did.
Yeah. So, Jonathon, tell everybody just a little bit about what is your role at FOCUS, and also a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, well, I'll start with myself. That feels more natural. Okay. I've been with FOCUS now for almost 10 years, and my wife and I, we joined staff engaged, and shortly afterwards got married. So we've been married for about, 9 years. So we have 4 kids. Kiara is our oldest. Augustin, we call him Gus. He is 5. And we got Gemma and Anna. So 7, 5, 3, and 8 months. And we live in Fargo, North Dakota. Yeah. We're busy, busy household. So
Yeah. Well, I know that having 4 kids and raising and living off support is just one more testament to God and His provision. So I have 4 kids myself. So and similar age spans too. So very cool. It's cool to hear someone that's in a season of life that I'm just kind of coming out of right now. So okay, so tell us a little bit about what is it you get to do with FOCUS?
Well, so I served on campus for about 8 years, and then last year I transitioned to work for our Denver Support Center remote from Fargo, and I work for our Mission Partner Development Department, and so or MPD, as many support raisers know it. And so MPD, our department, we train, coach, and support missionaries to develop mission partners. And my role specifically is working a little bit with our leader Mark and some of the tactical operations of the team and department, but mainly with helping our first-year missionaries, their onboarding, initial training, and initial support raising and support during their first year on staff.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mark Bartek and, of course, Mike Antonacci and of course, Jonathon Spaid. You guys got a lot of great people, so I am always thankful for the opportunity to engage with you. And this is fun. This is your first time on the podcast, right?
It is. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad you could be here. So the intent is for this to play or publish, however people like to say that, towards the end of the year and the beginning of the new year. And that tends to be the time when people will reflect on resolutions or new processes or new plans as they're moving forward. So Jonathon, this just seemed like the perfect time to dig into a discussion of planning when it comes to support raising, what and how to track as you plan your work and work your plan. And that's kind of a particular area of interest for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm kind of one of those guys who is a planner. I like to plan, but there's a pitfall with that, Aaron, because sometimes you get so caught up into the act of planning that it's hard to actually execute on that plan. And so what I've noticed as I've coached a lot of missionaries and just in my own experience, and I would be very curious to hear from your experience as well, like there's kind of this dichotomy between planning and executing. And sometimes people fall into this category where maybe they're not planning or executing at all, which of course is a recipe for disaster. If you have no plan and no intention to execute that plan, you're just kind of drifting through things. And as we know, your support team is not a static thing. Once you're fully funded, you don't stay fully funded because people's situations change. And so, but sometimes people might find themselves a little bit more like me, where they love to plan, but sometimes have trouble executing that plan. And so ideally where we really want to be is we want to have a must-win MPD plan that is actionable, that we're able to execute on. And I find a lot of people struggle with finding that balance. What's been your experience?
Well, okay, so just telling myself first, I am far more of an executor than I am a planner. Now, I do like to plan, so but I want it in a chunk. I want to write that plan out, and then I want the freedom to just do jazz. Like I want to go forward, but I also want to change the plan as I'm moving forward. I don't like to get too locked in. But sometimes I can get so far like off the rails that I have to come back and go, wait a minute, wasn't there supposed to be a plan here? you know,
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
I guess I kind of like both, but at the end of the day, I've experienced, especially when I was doing my primary bulk of my support raising, I had to get down to having clarity regarding my plan when it came down to meetings. I wasn't getting enough appointments, and I realized it was because I hadn't planned my time very carefully. My heart was in the right place, but my time was wanting to, be so shoot from the hip and just kind of go as God's leading, and all that kind of nice spiritual talk, to the point that it was actually kind of leading me down some dead ends because it wasn't God's leading; it was my lack of plan that was actually preventing me from getting fully funded in my early days. So that's my experience as an individual. Organizationally, I find I'm actually kind of similar. Even with leading Exago and partnering with Support Raising Solutions, I really, really cherish a plan, but I'm also a little flexible, and that can work good, and that can work against me. So I really need great people around me that kind of help hold me accountable to the stated plan so that I don't get too far off track. So that's my experience, at least. So I'm very thankful for the different leaders that I get to engage with through Exago, but also through Support Raising Solutions. Oh, I'm so thankful that Mark Wilson is now the director of Support Raising Solutions, because he brought a lot of peace to the chaos that I caused. So, so with that being said, that you probably have some of those similarities, but you like planning, and you like executing. So, what do you have more of a tendency one over the other, personally as well as organizationally?
Yeah, again, personally, I'm more of the planner, and unless I have clearly defined what my next steps are, it can be a little, I can fall back into the temptation to simply plan. So I need to distill my plan down
Mm-hmm.
into bite-sized, actionable goals, so that when let's say, I've scheduled some support raising time, Wednesday morning. So when it's 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning, I'm not sitting there trying to think, well, I've got this really big goal of I'm trying to raise this, or I'm trying to engage my mission partners in this way. But have no idea what the exact next step is that I need to take. And so part of, I think, the process of a must-win MPD plan is to understand the goal, but then to be able to distill that into a bite-sized chunk that with
Yeah,
crystal clear clarity, that you know exactly what you need to do when it's MPD
yeah,
time. And so that's kind of personally, although, organizationally, I don't know that it's all that much different. I would say you're looking at, a higher level, 30,000 foot view. Typically, you're not getting, we've got, 800 on campus missionaries in focus. And so we're not exactly in the weeds of their MPD plans, but we need to know, I guess, first and foremost, what factors do we need to measure in order to know that we have MPD health as an organization? And that's so having that crystal clear clarity of the goal of why you are, what's your plan and what are you tracking? That's really clear. As an
yeah,
organization, how do we know that we have MPD health and that we're putting ourselves in a place where we can, continue to say yes to the Lord's will wherever He is leading us? That sustainability and scalability issue as an organization. And so
yeah, yeah.
defining
So
that goal is really important.
that's so important. And for the listener, I want you to hear, Jonathan and I are actually kind of different in this way. Jonathan, like his status quo, so to speak, is to fall a little bit more into planning, and my status quo, so to speak, is to fall a little bit more into action. And neither of those are necessarily wrong, but we both need the other side. He needs to not sit around planning indefinitely and not getting things done. I need to slow down and think about stuff before I just brazenly run forward. And neither of us are wrong. It's that we need each other, and support raisers, just in general, need both. We need a good plan of action, but then we also need to have the not just the intent, but the actual action of following through on the plan. So I've been accused, and I think it was meant in a good way. I've been accused of being able to shoot from the hip, Jonathan, and
I
just
could
be
see
able
that.
to, yeah, and I accept that. I think that's true. Now I don't mind that when that spontaneity makes things better and helps those around me and helps me just follow the Lord's leading in stepping into an unplanned situation, but God knew what was going on. So it really can be a healthy thing. But it cannot be a healthy thing if I'm acting rashly or recklessly or bluntly and not even thinking through the long-term implications of being spontaneous in that moment. And so really what I'm trying to do is, as we're both talking about individuals as well as organizations here, I'm just trying to set up this as a two-part podcast that we're intending on doing here of saying people aren't wrong for maybe perhaps being more one way or the other, and even organizations aren't necessarily wrong perhaps being one a little bit more one way than the other, but in reality we need both. We need to be able to plan our work and work our plan, not just one or the other. And I think you're in full agreement with that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We need both. And maybe on an individual level, maybe you are, like, I guess a way to, an analogy, I guess, would be, I think in our culture, sometimes we fall into thinking that just find your strengths and pursue your strengths. And if you're not good at something, like, that's okay. You can't be good at everything. Don't worry about it. Just do what you're good at, find what you love and do what you love. And I think there's some merit there. However, I'd say that, especially from kind of a character standpoint and a Christian standpoint, yes, we want to operate from our strengths. Everyone should. However, we also need to train our weaknesses. And so, with kind of like a strength training analogy, like, flex your strengths, absolutely, but train your weaknesses also. And so, if you have strengths in planning, great, use those strengths. But you also need to work on executing your plan as well. So one tip for if you find yourself a little bit more like myself versus Aaron, where you are a planner but struggle executing on that plan, working the plan, as Aaron was saying, find some external accountability. That could be either like understanding. One thing that I found really helpful is really defining like why you are pursuing a goal. In a lot of coaching and in my own experience, like many people don't know they know what they want to achieve, but they don't exactly know why they want to achieve that and how achieving that is going to maximize the fruitfulness of their family and their mission, and what that will look like concretely. So actually visualizing that and defining that, I think, can be really motivating for people. And sometimes that can be like an external thing that will help people execute on their plan. Also kind of defining maybe like, how are you going to celebrate when you hit your goal? Can be really motivating. I've got, as I was thinking about it with my own, plan, I was really motivated by the idea of giving away, writing a large check at the end of the year. If I hit my fundraising goal, then my wife and I would be really motivated to write, a large check and to give away, and that's exciting for us. Now, another form of, external accountability could just look like accountability, finding some kind of coach or someone who can just check in with you and say, hey, did you execute on your plan? Now, or it could look like just at the organizational level, knowing your strengths, but then finding people who can compensate for your weaknesses,
Yes.
And so I would say, that's where, Mark Bartek and I really, and our team in general can really help each other. Because Mark is a lot more of that visionary, probably more shoot from the hip, and I'm a little bit more into the details and the planning. And so we balance each other out that way.
Great example. Great example. Yeah, I think Mark Wilson, who's the director of SRS, I think he's a lot more balanced than I am. I'm far more extemporaneous. He and I were actually just this morning messaging back and forth for a little training that we plan to do together soon. And I basically said, hey, yeah, I can totally lead that thing. That's no problem. Except, can you, provide the document with a few of the main points that we need to hit? Why? Because I know that he's going to make sure we're not forgetting anything, and that that freed me up to be, extemporaneous like I am. But he is going to be balancing, making sure that all the proper boxes are ticked that need to be handled that day. Even though he might be a little more comfortable having me actually lead the primary conversation. Not that he can't do it; he can totally do it. But he realizes where my strengths are, and I realize where his strengths are, and that's one of the many reasons it's fun for me to work with Mark Wilson, and one of the many reasons it's fun for you to work with Mark Bartek. But when it comes to
everybody, everybody needs a Mark, I guess.
There we go. Well, and I think that the best support raisers, they do have that vision for a long term support team, and as I know you previously said, that's rooted in a strong spiritual conviction, a biblical spiritual conviction about support raising, and but also it needs to be guided by annual goals, by scheduled actions, and so there really is room for both. But let's pick on the people that might be a little bit more like myself, that might be a little more shoot from the hip and extemporaneous. Let's talk about some of those famous quotes that put a little bit of fear and loathing in us. So tell me one or two of those. I know you had a couple of those in mind.
Yeah, well, there's the old adage that failure to plan is planning to fail. Now, if you
man, come on, you're killing me here.
Yeah, and if you Google who said that, you'll get 10 different answers. So I really honestly couldn't tell you who said that, but yeah, I find it to be.
We're going to say Mark Bartek.
Yeah, Mark Bartek. A failure to plan is planning to fail. So.
Hey, I'm sitting here with my friend Carissa Potter, who leads a wonderful ministry called Weave. And Weave has a heart for families and children, and that might just have something really big to do with your support raising if you have kids. So Carissa, tell us a little bit about the resources that people can get their hands on.
Yeah, if they go to our website, WeaveFamily, WEAVE family.org, they will be able to find hundreds of tools and resources to help disciple their kids to know the story of God that they're a part of and understand the world that we are called to love and reach.
Very cool. And so that's weavefamily.org. And as a little special thing, you can get 10% off if you use the code SRS Podcast. Let's take a few seconds to mention an important resource that can be helpful for support raisers. CMM Press has published another great book that is not only for those who raise their personal support, but also they oversee teams or even an organization whose staff teams raises their own personal support. Scott Morton is a champion for biblically based ministry partnership development, so I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of his book called Blind Spots. It's available at cmmpress.org, where you can receive a 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast.
So that's one, but one from the Bible is Proverbs 29:18, that where there is no vision, people perish. Mm-hmm. And so having that vision, understanding where you're trying to go and how to get there is really important. Otherwise, you're at risk, of not landing there, not getting there, and so, yeah, you're absolutely right. In my experience, a couple of years ago, I interviewed some of the best funded missionaries in Focus, and what I found was that the best support raisers within Focus, and I would imagine this would be true in other organizations as well, is that they have a long-term vision for their support teams that's rooted in a strong biblical conviction around MPD, and that's then guided by an annual goal of some sort distilled into a scheduled action. And that could be a daily action, weekly actions, or monthly. But basically, the best support raisers they knew where they were going, why they were going there. They were motivated and convicted from Scripture, and they knew how they were going to get there by always working their plan in some way, shape, or form, either on the daily, weekly, or monthly basis.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So if every MPD plan needs to be actionable, meaning it has both a plan that is for growing a support team, but also engaging a support team over the long haul, what's that look like?
Yeah. So I like matrices. I find these to be kind of helpful sometimes. So if you can, imagine, a 4-quadrant matrix, and the bottom left would be someone who's not planning or engage or executing their plan, which again, as we mentioned earlier, would be just a recipe for disaster. You're clearly not going to, achieve your goals. So then on the upper, left side of the quadrant would be planning but not executing, which again is where I could sometimes fall into, where I'm always working my plan, or I'm always planning but but never working my plan.
Right.
And then on the bottom right would be someone who more like Aaron, who shoots from the hips, likes to execute, but doesn't really have a plan. And so that kind of that where we really want to be striving to be is that upper right quadrant where we're both planning and executing that plan. We have the plan and we're working the plan. And then I think that every MPD plan or support raising plan is going to include both engaging and growing your team. So again, imagine another 4-quadrant matrix. On that bottom left is someone who's not growing or engaging their mission partners. And so again, that's not great. Becoming fully funded is awesome, but it's not, it's not a static thing. And so you're not going to grow and you're not going to engage in mission partners, and mission partners are going to wonder, what are you doing exactly? Haven't heard from you in a while. Right. So then on the upper left would be someone who's engaging, but not growing, which is awesome that you're engaging your mission partners. But again, you need to be growing because, people's financial situations change. You have a churn rate, attrition, mission partners who drop off. There's inflation in the economy sometimes, and so you have to just
want to give more, but they won't if you don't ask them.
Correct. Exactly. Yes. And so then again, on the bottom right would be someone who's growing, but not engaging, which again, you're always adding new mission partners, but you're not keeping them. And so as we know, it is easier to keep a mission partner than to gain a new one. And so engaging is really, really important. So now, so it's kind of similar. The balance, the ideal place that we want to be striving towards would be that upper right quadrant where we're engaging and growing our support teams.
Yeah. And so, I realize it is hard for listeners to visualize all that, but if they are actually, chart out that 4-quadrant matrix, it really is, it comes down to there's a portion that's really unhealthy that you don't want anything to do with. And there's a portion where, and we had different areas on this. We both had an area where we were kind of healthy, but not totally healthy. But ultimately there's real health. And so in a real health situation, you're not just planning, you're executing. And I'm not just executing, I'm planning. We're walking, as almost part of our sanctification and leaning in and becoming better in areas that are a little less natural when we're healthy. And the same thing with engaging and growing our support team. I don't naturally, and I know this makes me sound just like really shallow, but I don't naturally sit down and pray for my support team, even though my heart wants to. The way I move often doesn't do that. So I don't know what you do, but Jonathon, I actually plan time. It's on my calendar where I sit down and pray for my total support team on a regular basis, not weekly, but on a regular basis. But guess what? Unfortunately, and I know I'm a horrible person, but it just doesn't happen if it's not on my calendar. But because it's on my calendar, it happens. So there's some self-leadership in all of this, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. You got to know your strengths and you got to know your weaknesses, and you got to find, and again, that's great. You want to flex, your strengths, but you need to train those weaknesses. And so, what are they? And then, how can you kind of shore them up either through, finding a great partner, to hold you accountable, to walk with you in that, or just finding some of those life hacks, I should actually put that on my calendar. What I do, I would maybe be similar in terms of the praying for my supporters. And so what I've done is I've got a little postcard that says, hey, I'm praying for you. And then I printed off a list of all my supporters, and I, cut their names up so that's individually, and every day when I get to the office, I draw 1 or 2 names, and I just say a little prayer for them and fill out the postcard right then and there to send it to them. And so I find that I can be more consistent in praying for my supporters if I do just a little bit every day. I'm going to pray for 1 or 2 supporters every day when I get to the office. And it's just a little habit that takes, 3 to 5 minutes. But then I feel, then I know that I'm doing it,
Right. Very cool. Well, hey, I love that you talked about, having that plan even down to, because I mentioned the calendar and you came down to like having the little prayer reminders. And so right there, I think is a great place to really wrap up this episode. Again, we intended to do a two-parter here at the end of the year, beginning of the new year. So next week, let's come back and we're going to keep this going. And so to the listener, join us for part 2 of this. It's going to publish next week, and we're going to start digging into like an outline of what a great MPD plan looks like and what to track and setting some goals and some things like that. So, Jonathan, my friend, I know we're not done, but we're done for now. Thank you so much for joining me on the SRS podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Aaron.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.